So, I mean, clearly you're very experienced in fighting piracy around the globe. You're based in France, but you've got a global footprint. Different types of piracy. We've talked a little bit with Thomas and a little bit with Robin about some of the solutions that we can have to different types of piracy in different countries. With your experience, internationally speaking, can you give us sort of some background to some of the problems that you face and how you address those?
Hello, everyone, first, and thank you for participating to this meeting. I'm glad to be here. The objective of what I will answer is to share a little bit about what we face around the world as piracy. But before this, I'd like to define different type of piracy and different type of solution you might face depending on the content itself you do broadcast. As K+ in Vietnam or Canal+ more internationally, we're a group that are really focused on sport. And if you want to protect sport event, or let me call non-linear content, which non-linear means TV shows, movies, the way you will protect and the way you will have to protect your content will be a bit different. When you talk about sport, you talk about an event that happened in real time and people want to watch it when it's broadcasted. When you broadcast content that are movies, TV shows, there is a release date, of course, but the piracy will handle for a more long time. You don't have people watching football match 1 month after it happened. Once you know the result, you don't want to watch it anymore, you watch new matches. But a movies, a TV show, you will have to protect it for long term. So I will focus a little bit more on sport because this is our main concern today as Canal+. And this is a specific issue that we can find on several types of piracy. Sports can be pirated on social media. We talked about it a little bit earlier. That's a very big issue. There is a way to fight it. Maybe we'll come back a little bit after on this. And of course, Robin and Thomas mentioned a lot of the big piracy spreading over the world today, which is streaming, illegal websites, and IPTV applications. When it's about to fight this type of piracy, you have to adapt your technique. Depending on the way you want to address that piracy, of course, the first thing will be to be able to protect your content. And Thomas mentioned it. There is big investment in Canal+ Group and in K+ to be able to protect as much as we can our content. To do so, we will deploy DRM, we will deploy watermark fingerprinting solution so we can protect. But pirates are very good and they will be always capable of stealing your. And once they steal it, if it's on streaming or IPTV solution, IPTV is not quite popular in Vietnam yet, but streaming is. You have to.
So, any idea why that might be? Why do you think IPTV is not so popular yet?
I think I can come a bit more into details after, but Vietnamese people, they love Vietnamese content. They love Vietnamese language, and they are quite advanced in technology. So when you come in Vietnam, you have Vietnamese pirate websites that are very popular, and if you can access quite easily to your language when you want to even watch content, you will focus on this. IPTV, they are more global services. They are spreading all over the world, but there is no quite specific Vietnamese IPTV right now, but they are very big streaming websites. To address this piracy, and we said it on the presentation from Robin just before, site blocking and collaboration is the key. So IP blocking and DNS blocking are both our best tools right now that we use to fight against this type of piracy.
Any countries in particular where you're using that?
So our big business in Canal+ International is, of course, you have France, but you also have Africa. And in Africa today, we have 2 countries where we do some live IP blocking. You have Mauritius Island, which is not on the continent. And you have Mali also that has just been launched a few weeks ago. And we are now able, during football match, to make some IP blocking. And we don't see the result yet. As we say, we need long-term fight to start to see the result as is shown in the Nizam slide. But we hope we will see it quite soon.
Server level block?
Sorry?
Is it IP server level?
Yeah. IP? So
is it IP server level blocking?
Server delivery and front-end website blocking when we can.
Is it through the government or through court order?
In those countries, it's through local authorities, but the local authorities granted us a direct relationship with ASP. Fight this, when it's about sport, you have to react very, very quickly. If you take 60 to 90 minutes to block the website, the football match will be over. And as we said, the new website will be up the next day. So if you want to fight efficiently for live sport event, the piracy, you will have to react in 5 to 10 minutes. And that's why we managed to work with the authority to raise the awareness of how is the piracy for a sport event. and they allowed us to have a direct relationship with the SPs. They can watch whatever we send to the SP for blocking. They have evidence, they have access to some evidence and report. But we send the blocking, and in 5 minutes, it will be blocked by the SP.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll continue on later on, but for now, Kuin, you and I have worked together for a very long time. It's our 20th year anniversary this year that we've been working to fight piracy. Disney, I'm presuming VOD, while you have sports content, VOD, I imagine, in the region is more of a concern for you. Are there any types of online piracy in the region that you find more concerning or more difficult to address than others?
So I think definitely streaming piracy is a predominant form of piracy in the region. I think in the past, torrenting was very popular. People wanted to kind of like download the files to do it. But with the increase of internet speed, it's so much more convenient now to just find a good piracy site and then to just stream your favorite shows off a piracy website. So I think that's become like one of the most popular ways of consuming piracy content in the region. I mean, we do still see piracy in the form of set-top boxes, but less so in certain regions because there still tends to be a cost associated with set-top boxes. I mean, most people still, because if you buy the box, often the people who sell the box would also sell a subscription to those services. So there is still a fee involved, whereas for a lot of the piracy sites, they tend to be ad-supported, and therefore, in that sense, notionally free to the user. But I mean, as you mentioned, when it's free, then the user becomes the product. So, they are targeted by potentially malicious software or various kinds of illicit advertising. So that's something that I've seen in the region.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that whole, the customer as the product thing is really not widely understood. And we were talking before about the need for messaging. The days of you wouldn't steal a car, it's not a popular message. It's not going to work. But I do think the fact that if you're accessing a pirate site service and it's free, then you're the product, even though you don't know it. I think that's something that we need to be getting that message out. Also, interestingly, I think that message really resonates with governments because they're so concerned about cybercrime, cybersecurity of consumers and of voters that I think that there is real concern. Interestingly as well, I'm sure you read my research paper on Taiwan recently, there's also potential for piracy services to be used for nefarious purposes, not just by criminals. I think we're really seeing the development of different types of attack and of warfare, and it's quite possible for piracy services to be used in that way.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that piracy has evolved over the years. I mean, back in the really good old days, or I wouldn't say good old days, but in the old days of let's say streaming piracy of music stream apps, a lot of people shared, pirated content not because they wanted to make money out of it. They literally wanted to share the content. The people who kind of created those services like Napster didn't really quite do it to make money. Even BitTorrent, the people who set up the whole system, it wasn't about making money.
Cachet.
Yeah. This is so different now. In this day and age, virtually every single major piracy service is there purely for monetization. It's run by pirates, it's run by syndicates. It's there to make money. And these people don't care how they make money, right? They make money either through advertising, they make money through stealing your data, they make money through selling your data. Or it's just a whole different landscape out there. And understanding that this piracy websites are now being operated by criminals, I think that's a message that people really need to understand. So most people wouldn't want to interact with criminals in their day-to-day, but then by accessing a piracy site, that's exactly what you're doing. So, handing these people access to your computers, access to potentially sensitive data, you don't know what they might put on their piracy sites when you access it. So there's going to be a risk there that hopefully more people will get to understand.
They're kind of like gateway drugs, pirate sites. I mean, they're either taking you to gambling or you're giving backdoor access to malware or all sorts of other nasties.
With a lot less risks to them, actually. And I think that's the thing about running a piracy site. I mean, high gain, low potential risk. A lot of times when these pirates, even if they get caught, compared to the risk of like trafficking drugs, the penalties that come from running a piracy site is almost negligible, especially compared to how much they can make out of it. And I think that's one of the challenges we face as well in certain jurisdictions where the penalties are low, because if you're gonna, be prosecuted and all you get is like, a small fine, that's literally a slap on the wrist. It's gonna be, wrapped into like your cost of running business, basically. I mean, if you're gonna make, few $1 million running a piracy service, getting hit with like, $10,000, $20,000 US fine, this is nothing.
It's a really interesting point. And going back to the UK again, I mean, they're probably leading the way in the terms of prison, real prison sentences. I think 9 years, some of the people got there, but you're right. It's just a slap on the wrist. I will shut down the piracy service. So I think it's not really understood a lot of the time. The wider spread collateral damage that can be caused by these. But Fabien, it's probably time to talk about less, sort of what can be the damage, but what can be done. So, your Friend MTS and Robin's given us a bit of an overview of the type of technology that Friend's got and what Friend does. But can you perhaps talk a little bit more about, what Friend's doing in the region and how sort of technology can harness to protect content, stop piracy?
The interesting thing is, the way we look at piracy is really both ways, global and local. I mean, in one way, it's obviously very global in terms of the way content is sourced, the way content is distributed, the methods used by pirates, the syndicates that basically operate globally, that run massive businesses. There is distribution within regions as well of content exchange internationally. But we look at it also from a very localized view where basically the demand, languages, consumption, that penetration, mobile first, not certain regions of this market. So from our point of view, it's a mix of using the learnings and the deployments we've done globally with some of the key players in the market that Robin presented and applying that to the region. So the holistic approach of looking at all the different piracy vectors that you presented in slides, very important. They vary massively depending on markets, depending on content, sometimes even in the same, say, sport league, certain matches actually attract more subscription IPTV than web piracy. So it's really, really dynamic. So to address that, we're looking at it both ways. I mean, Robin talked a lot about it, but data is key. So data generation is key about looking at these vectors, where are they prevalent, and generating a lot of information on IPs, domains, frequency, volume, etc., and derive the right strategy behind to put the right enforcement. And there's a number of enforcements, but information sort of the way to go, right? It's obviously some checks are required in some cases when regulatory is in place, but looking at what's been done in other markets, basically ensuring the efficacy, how we're looking at it.
And also, when you're talking about automation and the need for safeguards, that's part of the service you provide, is to ensure that that there are safeguards.
Absolutely, and there are, I mean, sort of counter examples, not in this region, but in Europe, on how not to do it in terms of overblocking, and it's sort of music to our ears in terms of showing how successful markets have been doing, customers have been doing to implement blocking.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Flavien, coming back to Vietnam and Asia Pacific, that's what we're here to discuss. We've talked a little bit about, well, I've mentioned actually, the localized piracy forms that we see, which I think are largely language-driven in Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. But have you noticed any forms of piracy or piracy services that are particular to Asia Pacific or Vietnam?
Yes, and I'm glad you showed the slide before, because our conclusion are emerging quite well. In Vietnam, streaming is a big problem when it's about piracy. Lots of people are streaming, and we did a small analysis on the top 100 website, for example. And we'll not just talk about sport, but streaming, illegal streaming is a big problem for all kinds of content in Vietnam. In the top 100 website, you have 14 different websites of last month that are dedicated for anime illegal streaming, for example. If you watch on the top 1,000 website, you will never find any international streaming website. All of them they're all local streaming website. And you have dozens of sports streaming websites in the top 1,000. Those websites, they all come from Vietnam. I don't know if I can name this one peculiar galaxy of website that is quite known. Okay, so the famous one, if you check this website, I'm pretty sure even if you go right now, you will find one page with that website available. And if you check on this website, there is also a big problem is that they use streaming, as you said, for different business behind. You go on the sports streaming website, you will always find some betting link. And what we found also is that the outgoing traffic from the streaming websites, illegal streaming website, quite often relates to betting websites. So it confirms what you say. So local streaming websites are very famous. They are related to betting websites also, and it attracts a lot of people due to the language and the culture in Vietnam.
I mean, they're honeypots, really. They're attracting people in. But I think the beauty of illegal gambling tied to live sport is that you can gamble on the pirate game. So you get to watch the free pirated sport game, and at the same time, look, if you're watching that illegally, why don't you gamble illegally as well? They're very clearly, closely entwined criminal intent.
I said right now because I hope we will be able to handle this type of piracy, and I hope IPTV will not become also as popular as we can see around the world. But we need to keep in mind that right now we're going to focus on fighting the local piracy because this is what is very popular in Vietnam. 95% of traffic of this website is coming from Vietnam. And we talk about a website that is up for mainly 2 weeks per month. They change name every 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, they can gather as much as 2 million unique visitors. This website. So the figures are massive. But we got to think about the future. If we tackle this piracy quite well, and I hope we will, then people will start to find a new way to pirate. Even if they love Vietnamese language, if they need the Vietnamese culture, if you stop this from being available, people will turn over other easy way to consume piracy before they will pay eventually. So fight this website first, and keep in mind that in the next years, we will have also to handle the international piracy.
Thanks. But I think what we've spoken a lot about so far in pretty much all of our talks today has been, the problem of piracy, streaming piracy, and a lot of talking about technology solutions and in particular site blocking. But those are to an extent part of an enforcement program. And enforcement and protection of content is absolutely crucial to any kind of broadcast business. You, Kuin, I mean, you've got more experience than anyone here in terms of enforcement of rights around Asia Pacific. There's been some really good enforcement in Vietnam in the last 6 to 12 months. Can you maybe talk us through some of what are the good aspects of a good enforcement program?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, great to burst your bubble, but the international aspect of piracy for Vietnam has already been here. Maybe not for sports piracy, but for general entertainment piracy. That website that Matt mentioned that was taken down, FO, in the first half of 2024, had a traffic of over 7 billion views.
And that was just F Movie.
That was just F Movie. There were associated domains. That site, that group, I think they had over 400 over associated domains. And the traffic was not just coming from Vietnam, it was coming from US. So it's a globally significant piracy site because it was so easily accessible, it was so user-friendly. And the thing about tackling piracy, whilst site blocking is definitely a good tool for disruption. We've heard many of the speakers here talk about how the sites keep hopping, you take one down, it comes up. So very often the key to really shutting down piracy services, track down the operators of the site, and then to get action taken to prosecute these operators. And that is not easy. We have been tracking F-Movies since I think 2018 or so, engaging with law enforcement since 2021, and then we're now in 2024. So this shows kind of like how long it took for an action to kind of like gestate from investigating to identifying the ultimate operators. And a big part of it's also kind of like, educating law enforcement, because in the past, piracy was simple when it was in the physical format, right? You had a factory printing out DVDs, you find a factory, you raid the factory, you take a tractor to run over all those physical DVDs. Very, visible, very easy concept to understand. Counterfeit goods, counterfeit product, locate the source, rate the source, you're done. When it comes to digital piracy, a lot of, the law enforcement in certain jurisdictions still need to kind of like grapple their mind around what is being infringed. How do you trace it back to the operator? How can you be sure it's the operator? And then, just getting the information on whose rights have been infringed, or what's the actual damage that's been caused, because you're not counting physical products anymore. So that whole thing is a huge process. And definitely, I think Vietnam has come a long way in actually taking action in such a manner. The actions taken this year were actually the first ever prosecutions. I mean, you have F movies, but prior to that, we have Best Buy TV, where we actually had a sentence. I mean, F movies, I think, is still going through the process. We haven't gone through the courts yet. But I think we still have a long way to go in terms of making sure this process goes faster. I mean, the time taken, hopefully it's not going to be as long the next time we do it, because obviously the first case is always going to take the longest, because everyone's kind of like learning along the way. Hopefully the cases will come faster, and hopefully the penalties are going to be stronger. I think for Best Buy TV, we saw suspended prison sentences. Slightly disappointing. When we are talking about this level of piracy, this level of harm that's being caused, the penalties need to be commensurate with the level of piracy. And I think that's something that hopefully the judges and the courts would start to recognize and understand as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've been talking a lot about disruption, but enforcement is so crucial. And the F movie sentence is going to be really interesting to see what. Because I think that there has been, and interestingly, I noticed sort of like post-COVID, enforcement efforts around the region. I'm not sure if this was the same in Africa and in Europe, but enforcement efforts just dropped off. It was like either there were no police left or they were busy off fighting COVID or something. But enforcement actions really went through the floor.
I didn't mention that part of because we're focusing on online piracy, but we do have a lot of enforcement in Africa especially. And during the COVID, we got quite grateful that we still had a lot of operation. In Africa, if you want a few numbers, we are able to tackle local piracy. There is local piracy, which is named cable piracy. It's a pirate that is using some legitimate signal, gathers all the signal in one same cable, and he will throw cable from his house to sometimes 10,000 different people around his house in the neighborhood. We do have this enforcement locally, and we do dismantle 2 bays per day each year since like 6 years or 7 years now. So it's more than 600 bays dismantled in 4 different countries in Africa. So there is a lot of enforcement, and this is crucial to do it. The thing is that it's quite long to do it, so you have to choose wisely your targets. You can't go against all the pirates of the internet because there's so many.
One of the interesting things, just like digressing for a little minute here, is the sort of the lower level of priority which a lot of countries and a lot of enforcement authorities give to piracy and protecting content. Yet on the other hand, everyone wants to emulate Korea and be the next Korea, producing a whole lot of original content, which people around the world are going to watch. But I think what a lot of people don't know is that Korea has the most resources devoted to fighting piracy and protecting content than any other country in the region. I had a guy on stage last year. There are 450 people in essentially one government anti-piracy organization in Korea, and that's only one of, I think, 3 or 4 of them. So, yeah, I think the need to actually protect the content as well as promoting the content is super, super important. But Fabien, if we could come back a little bit, we've talked about enforcement, but coming back to protecting content online, and particularly in Asia Pacific and particularly in Vietnam, are there any solutions that you think are more efficient than others?
Yeah, I think we touched on it on the previous panels and so right before. It's about looking at the sources of piracy. And obviously, if you produce your own content and distribute it on your own platform, you're the main source of the original content and therefore exposed to basically piracy. So if you contract exclusive content, in particular live sport, it's in a single market, you're the only legal source of that market. So our job, and I think I mentioned about it, what they're doing today, it's really looking at your platform first and make sure that, one, there's no vulnerabilities on the technology side. I mean, we talked about the good old days where there were no CDNs and no IP devices and mobile broadband. Well, this has opened up huge opportunity basically for pirates to source content either directly from the end or using TRM vulnerability, or simply restreaming their subscription. So we have a range of technologies that basically start with distribution watermarking, user-based watermarking, but also key in the effectiveness of these services is not only that you're only secure, but it's monitoring basically and finding these watermarks to actually shut down you. So this is the first element that needs to get the right, in fact, for premium content, especially when you're the source or the unique source in your market.
And it must be so frustrating. Got your house.
Exactly. And then it's obviously blocking. We talked a lot about blocking. I think touched about before, but it's an ecosystem play in both cases. Even in the case of protecting content that is distributed, we work a lot with right holders and we work with them in terms of monitoring globally where their content is pirated. We work with them in defining the requirements that go into their contracts in terms of saying, well, you need ideally, and then obviously sometimes subject to negotiation depending on specifics of the market, but setting the standard in terms of what's required for successful delivery to the platform and to the end user. This is absolutely key.
I agree. I'm conscious of time. Before we does anyone have any questions for any of the panelists that we've got up here today? Yes.
Hello. Tôi có thể nói bằng tiếng Việt được không? Hay tôi sử dụng tiếng Anh? Okay, I think I could speak in English. Of course, we see that now we have many solutions on fighting piracy, right? But the rate of content infringement is increased by rate year by year. So either we are not yet find exactly the resources of or the source of the content that is infringed.
I think it's. I think you're right. We haven't found some of the sources, but I think also in the last 6 to 12 months, as Kuin was saying, I think the Vietnamese government is becoming a lot more proactive in stopping piracy, locally based piracy. So the interesting thing about the piracy in Vietnam is you've got a huge local market, and then you've got a huge market which is providing pirate content internationally. And the government, through its site blocking program and through enforcement against like the likes of Best Buy and F Movies, is taking actions against both. Like I said, what will be really interesting is my surveys next year and the year after, because I think there is a lot of action which has been taken, but there's still a very big problem.
Yeah, agree with you. But as you see, in Vietnam now, most of the piracy content is not come from Vietnam. I think, yeah, I am flexible like the EPL content. So most of the EPL content piracy in Vietnam is not come from not come from cablers, not come from any broadcast in Vietnam. They come from outside, but it is a broadcast in Vietnam, or even they pull it in Vietnam, then broadcast it.
Flavien, you're probably best placed to. Do you want to answer that one?
I don't have a perfect answer for this. It's true that when you do make a big effort to protect your content, it's a bit frustrating to see that the piracy into your country where you distribute your offer can come from different right holders that are not even available in the country where you are. So that's why it's very important to have this type of sharing to raise awareness of everyone and to deploy the solution. It exists a few solutions, but they are here that allows every right holder to protect its own content. And if it's not to protect it, at least it's to be able to identify the source of the piracy, the customer at the base of the piracy. And we have to gather all, and there is no concurrency in piracy. We are all allies, and we need all to work together through association like CAP or any world association that will gather all the right holder together and that will make them make the good choice in protecting their content. Everyone has to do it. And if there is at least one right owner that is not protecting its content, the pirate will find it and they will use it.
So
I finished. But still, so they use signal from overseas and put it on local Vietnamese website, for instance, for legal streaming. But that's a first move, at least blocking the localized signals that we produce here.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. So the content locally is being protected and it's being pirated elsewhere, but then it's being distributed on like an industrial level locally. So I think it needs to be a two-pronged approach, trying to protect as best as possible content elsewhere and then trying to protect as best as possible content being distributed in Vietnam as well.
Can I add to, obviously blocking today, I understand, is done for local sites here only, but wherever we've deployed it in UK or in Canada, it's basically any content that infringes, the local licensee ownership of the content. So standing blocking, ideally dynamic IP plus domain blocking on all sites, the solution.
Okay, look, thank you. I realize that we're out of time. We've actually gone over a little bit of time. Feel free to have a chat to any of us. We're going to have a coffee break now for 30 minutes or so. But Fabien, Flavien, and you, Kuin, thank you very much for your time and your contribution, and I wish you safe travels home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, as I mentioned, we've got a coffee break now for 30 minutes, and we'll see everybody back here in 30 minutes.